So next up is Patrick Henry, and I want to welcome Patrick, but first of all, personal note. What he's going to talk about today actually helped me professionally and personally, so I just want to, in front of everybody, thank you, Patrick, for the hard work you put in to kind of set me up in my new position. Patrick's couple of fun facts for Patrick. He has got 12 years of successful fundraising experience, American Heart Association, University of South Florida, currently here at UF, and he came here in 2016, so he's been on board for over 5 years now. He's been doing really, had the pleasure of working with him the last couple months, and I think you're going to really enjoy his talk. Keeping with the theme of being proactive and taking initiative, what Patrick is going to share with you is a story of how he came into a situation that he felt needed some improvement, and he took the initiative and he started benchmarking, and I think you're going to really like this case study. So welcome, Patrick. Good luck.
Oh, thank you. Good morning. Thanks for joining us all this morning. As Dan was saying, my presentation is a story from benchmarking, and what really inspired me to want to do this presentation was my work with the UF Health Cancer Center. Back in September of 2019, Joe Mandernock asked me to fill in on an interim basis the Cancer Center's development team. And for anybody that's familiar with the Cancer Center, they've really struggled for the better part of a decade in their fundraising. And knowing that this wasn't going to be a permanent position for me, what I did want to do was leave it in a better position than when I found it, and hopefully put it on the pathway to success for our new senior director, Dan Hoffman. So getting into it, what is benchmarking? Well, according to Robert C. Camp in his book, A Bible for Benchmarking, it's the continuous process of measuring our products, services, and practices against those of our toughest competitors or companies renowned as leaders. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all 10 steps that's listed in his book, but what I can tell you, in keeping this very straightforward and simple, is that it really did start with Xerox in the private sector. Back in the 1970s and 80s, they were really widely known for benchmarking against their competitors in Japan to provide better products and services, and that really transcended throughout the private sector, and now even into our industry today. For example, UF in top 5. Just a few short years ago, we were ranked outside the top 10, I think number 14 actually, but now we're number 5. How did we get there? Well, we did. We looked at all the top 5, all top 10 universities and what they were doing from a thing like APR, their faculty and student ratio, and we looked at it and we made some changes of our own. For example, we added 500 new faculty here to the University of Florida, which improved our faculty and student ratio. That is an example of benchmarking. So why do we benchmark? Well, here at the University of Florida, and maybe here in advancement, it could be for one of these reasons. Maybe you're starting a new position, or you're new to the University of Florida, or you're just promoted to lead your college or unit. Maybe you're creating a new development strategy or something as small like an annual giving campaign, or maybe you're just trying to justify to your dean why you need more staff, or maybe, and also in my case, why you need to disband an advisory board. So going a little bit more depth of the Cancer Center here, this is a 5-year overview that I shared with our Cancer Center Director, Dr. Jonathan Licht. Since fiscal year 2015, you're looking at the total number of commitments that are highlighted here. On average, raising just over $500,000 a year. Going to the next slide, another slide that I share with Dr. Licht. This is the number of transactions for the UF Health Cancer Center in its lifetime. I highlighted the portions that were really relevant for me. 31 gifts of $100,000 or more in the Cancer Center's lifetime. I will add that they started the campaign with an $80 million goal. So after going through the data, going through the giving history, going through the portfolio, I talked to faculty, I talked to staff, and really started jotting down a lot of my observations, and I highlighted a few of those. Consistent turnover in development staffing, I wonder why. No major gift or principal gift activity from individual donors. There's an inconsistent grateful patient activity. We have an advisory board with no roles, responsibilities, tenure, really direction. And it was a very events-based fundraising model. And it was driven by the advisory board at that time and supported by the senior director when that person should be focused on major gift fundraising. So how do we benchmark? What steps can we really take here? Well, you saw what I did first. I surveyed the landscape. I really went through the giving history, the portfolio, talking to faculty and staff, and if you're lucky, maybe some development colleagues that were in that position prior. I also participate in advancement organizations, and I highly recommend that. Things like AAMC or CASE, AHP, NACTO, not just to gain knowledge of our industry, but to really connect with our peers across the country, because those are going to be the individuals that I want to talk to learn more about what their organization is doing compared to ours. Listing observations. You saw what I did, listing all of my observations based on my research. But with that, I need to start developing some assumptions from that, because that's going to help me build my narrative. And in some cases, you might want to create a SWOT analysis. I highly recommend that as well. Understanding your unit a little bit better, knowing their strengths, weaknesses, their areas of opportunity to grow will be important for you. And for me, one of the next things that I do, of course, we need to start looking at our peers and asking them very specific questions about their operations. And hopefully from that, we can start making some conclusions. So, key components for benchmarking. I will preface that these components, these are what work for me, but these may not be what work for you in talent management or donor relations. But for me particularly, here at the Cancer Center, one of the things I looked at, current and proposed staffing. Does it really make sense for me to interview organizations that have 6, 7, 8 fundraisers when we only have one? What about budget? Does it make sense for me to interview organizations that have a budget of $1 million or even $5 million a year when ours is less than $500,000? What about giving? Should I be interviewing organizations that are raising $15 to $20 million a year annually? We're raising just over $500,000. What about the source of their gifts? Are they events-based, or are they're giving from individual donors or corporate and foundation? If I have a board, I should probably be interviewing organizations that also have a board, because they're going to give me a little bit more insight on how they manage that board. And then finally, for me, one of the things I also looked at is geography. We're in Gainesville, Florida. Does it make sense for me to interview organizations that are in Miami or Atlanta? The demographics are far different than Gainesville, Florida. Very important slide that I share with Dr. Licht. These were all the cancer centers that I interviewed, and including some of them that Dr. Licht recommended to me based on their geography, their demographics, or their budget. But you look here, the development budget, $500,000 to $1 million, some less than $500,000. The number of fundraisers, 4 or less. That's not really out of the realm of possibility for us. But looking at the far right, what they're raising annually, $3, $5, $6, $7 million. The only outlier I have here is the University of Miami, the Sylvester Cancer Center. And the reason I had that, not just because they're in the state of Florida, but frankly, I was really tired of Dr. Licht telling me what the University of Miami was raising annually, or that $100 million gift that they just closed. We really need to have some perspective here. They have a $5 million a year budget. They have 7 full-time fundraisers. It's no wonder they're raising over $20 million every single year. So what's next? We really need to start asking ourselves these questions. Do those institutions perform at a level that we aspire to be? Well, they have similar budgets, they have similar fundraising staff, and they're raising a lot more, $5-6 million. You can bet that your dean, and including Dr. Licht for me, was wanting to raise that amount of money and believes that we can do that. But of all those areas of the cancer centers that I interviewed, what areas can be identified that can be realistically changed? I can't go to Dr. Licht and ask him for a $5 million budget, or I need 5 more fundraisers. I really need to come up with something that's more tangible. Will he support those ideas? Maybe instead of a $5 million budget, maybe we talk to him about ways that we can restructure our cancer center. So what do? We need to start matching all of those observations in our conclusions based on the best practices that those peer institutions are telling me. And from that, from all of those assumptions that I made, we need to start building our narrative and making our case. But before we start going and implementing change, and I highly recommend this, review with your supervisor, get buy-in. And I'll tell you why in a little bit later. And then hopefully from that, that's when we can start implementing some change. And in summary, these are just some of the things that we looked at based on what our cancer centers were telling us. We need to look at the future of our advisory board. We need to start thinking about rebooting our program, focusing on individual giving. We need to start developing a major gift pipeline and increasing the number of major gifts. And then we also need to find a better way to streamline our events and coordinate with our donor relations team. And some of those outcomes and results from that, we did disband the advisory board back in April 2020. What we learned from these cancer centers across the country is that board members. They all had roles, responsibilities. They even had tenures. But what also we also figured out was our current board was based on events-based fundraising. That's all they did. That's all they focused on. It didn't really make sense for us to have them transition from events fundraising to something they're not familiar with, individual giving. Our plan was to build a new advisory board in the future that can be focused on our new individual giving model. We did centralize our events, going through our donor relations team, taking that responsibility off of the senior director, allowing them to focus on major gift fundraising. What we learned from these cancer centers is that they are actually moving away from events, which was really popular among cancer centers across the country. But now they're putting all of their resources into individual giving, hiring more major gift officers. And because of major gift fundraising, we need to start engaging our faculty more about grateful patient fundraising. Here at UF Health, that is our pipeline for major gifts. We need to connect with our faculty to get more prospects and increase major gift fundraising. And since the beginning of this calendar year, we've already started seeing some results. Over $8 million in gifts have been raised from individuals. So some takeaways. What did I learn from all of this? Well, one, benchmarking can help you make the argument. You saw what I shared, the 5-year overview. You saw that I shared the number of transactions in the cancer center's lifetime, but also that cancer center slide of all the cancer centers across the country. Those helped me make the argument, establishing my narrative, and most importantly, all the notes that I took from my cancer centers helped me make the argument to Dr. Licht. Your supervisor's your ally. There is no way I was going to be able to disband an advisory board without Joe Mandernock having my back. Not to champion the idea, but to really help me dot my I's, cross all of my T's, because there was going to be a political battle going forward, and Joe helped me navigate that. Benchmarking can be used for all areas of advancement. It's not just in development, it was in the private sector. This can be used in donor relations, talent management, marketing, communications. You just need to find the components that are really relevant for you that you can measure with your peers across the country. And then finally, it takes time and patience. It took me weeks, really months, to come up with all the data, looking at the giving history, interviewing all of these cancer centers, and really making my case to Dr. Licht. And not just implementing change. It's not an overnight thing. Give yourself some time to actually see that change be successful. And thankfully, so far we already have. Now it's on Dan. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Really appreciate it.